they tell me I'm good, so we'll get this started. I'm a time person, and so it's 6:06, which has me a little nervous because I like to start on time. That way we can end on time, and you all can, get back to the rest of your evening. But I want to thank you for coming. I want to thank Lebanon Now. They're live streaming for us tonight, so this meeting and the questions and the answers will be live streamed on Lebanon Now, which means it will also be recorded. So if you wanted to go back and watch again, or if you wanted to share with your neighbors or friends who couldn't be here, you'd have that recording and you could share. So thanks so much for doing that. I want to recognize Americans for Prosperity, and I want to thank them for coming. They're traveling all over the state trying to help folks understand what's being proposed with Amendment 5. I want to recognize Uriah Stark, who's here with the Missouri Promise. He's also doing that. And I want to recognize a couple of our officials. Jarrett Scharnhorst is here, city official, city council member, newly elected. Thank you for coming. And then Randy Angst, of course, is our presiding commissioner. Thank you, Randy, for joining us as well. I'm Melissa Schmidt. Most of you know that. State representative. My district entails all of Wright County, portions of Laclede, Douglas, and Webster. So just happy that you all are here. And I want to introduce our guest, but I will do a brief introduction and then I'm gonna pass it to Camilla with Americans for Prosperity. She's got some instructions if you have questions, because we hope this will be interactive. So State Representative Bishop Davidson, what's your district number, Bishop? 130. District number 130, which is the Willard area. He actually is state rep for some of our family that lives down in that area, but he is the bill sponsor for HJR 173 and 174. I may have said that incorrectly. He'll correct me. So he's our guest. Thank you, Bishop, for coming, and I'm going to turn it over to Camilla.
It's okay. It's not a big deal. People understand that.
I'm with Americans for Prosperity. We're a grassroots organization, and this is a lot of what we do is make sure that we do everything that we can to get information
That'd be great.
People for
Whatever you think. Whatever.
Okay.
I think
that we get information out to people about what's going on with their legislature and ways that they can get involved, because a lot of times people you can feel kind of powerless, right, to impact what's going on in your government. So our role is to help people get engaged and have a voice and a say, and to have the information that they need to know how to vote, how to talk to their legislators and all those kind of things. I am from not too terribly far away, Southwest, just south of Joplin. Grew up there. Still live my parents still live 500 feet down the hill from me on the property I grew up on. So I feel very blessed, and I love Missouri. Have two daughters. One is here with me over there at the check-in table. So I really appreciate you guys coming out tonight, because there's a lot of noise online about this. Lots of people have lots to say. And, when it comes down to it, you guys show up. You're here because you might not be in agreement with it, but you're here to have the conversation, and that's the important thing. That is one of the most important things that we can do, no matter what side you're on, or no matter what you think about different issues, is that we can sit down and we can talk about it, and we can discuss what all of the different views on it. So that's what we're here for, and I appreciate you guys being here and willing to do that. Thank you to Lebanon Now. Having the ability to get this out to everybody, for the people who can't come tonight, right, but they're out there and can maybe watch this later. That's what we want to do, is get it to as many people as possible to hopefully answer some of those questions. So I am going to, is Representative Davidson here? Okay. I'll stall, I'll fill time. Okay. Representative Davidson is going to go over all the bill in its entirety, basically all the basics of it, how it came to be, some of the background, some of the things that you need to know. So he will cover all of those things. And then there are cards, there's literature on the table that give more information on things. There are cards on there. Since we are a smaller group this evening, we're not going to mess with the cards. If we're a larger group, it's easier to have people write their questions down. So when we get to the question and answer time, you just raise your hand or whatever you would like to do, and we'll have the conversation. You can ask the questions that you have after hearing Representative Davidson go through everything. So Representative Davidson, if you would like to come on up, why, we'll go ahead and get started.
Okay, sounds good. I don't know if I have been welcomed with applause yet, so that was really nice. Very warm and welcoming. And we will see whether or not you welcome me or chase me out of town after this. No. Thank you all for being here. It's rainy. It's gross. I actually kind of like the rain, but really appreciate you being here to learn about Amendment 5. It is a really complicated piece of legislation. And when you're lawmaking, at least this is what I hope for all lawmakers, when you're lawmaking, it's important to start with the why. Why is it that you're doing the thing you're doing? And from that why, you start to piece together prudent, practical policy decisions to address that problem or address that issue. And the why for me is pretty simple. It's probably pretty relatable to you. How many of you know someone who's complained about gas prices in the last 2 weeks? Yeah? Does anyone know someone who has struggled with buying a home anytime recently? How many of you have someone in your life, maybe a young family with a couple kids, they'd like to have more kids, but financially they're trying to decide whether or not they can have that next one? I mean, these aren't made up. These are people in our own lives. These are people in my life. I'm one of 9 kids. I have 11 nieces and nephews, lots of young families around me that I get to watch in their successes and their triumphs, but also in the challenges that they face. And those challenges aren't new. They actually have been with our economy for a long time. It's an affordability challenge. It's turned into an affordability crisis more recently. But healthcare is more expensive. Education's more expensive. Housing is 4.5 times as expensive as it was 40 years ago, proportionate to income. Wages have been pretty stagnant. They've stayed more or less the same. And when I think about what it is I would like to see accomplished in the state of Missouri, I try to ground it in what do I want a regular Missourian's life to look like. And I want a regular Missourian to be able to afford a mortgage. I want them to be able to afford a couple cars. I want them to be able to afford a used car for their 16-year-old. I want them to be able to put some aside for retirement and some aside for a college fund. I'd like for them to be able to afford a $1,000 emergency expense. I'd like for them to be able to take their family on vacation. I'd like them to be able to have a few Netflix and Hulu subscriptions. And this is the sort of life that I think we could have for many Missourians, but it's a life that's increasingly out of reach. And so the why really does have to go from numbers and words and legislation and economics, which is all very, very important. But if it's not tethered to something real, if it's not tethered to a real person's real life, then it's not worth talking about. And so I want to give you a sense of the why. But lawmaking means more than asking why. It also means asking how. And the how behind boosting our economy, the how behind fixing that problem is a little bit more contentious, a little more divided, a little more controversial, and worth more discussion. I would say the single biggest thing, not a silver bullet, but the single biggest thing Missouri can do from a policy perspective to help the economic opportunities and the economic forecast of our state is to eliminate income taxes. But when you get into the how of eliminating income taxes, you really have only 3 ways you can accomplish it. One, you can utilize excess revenue growth over time to buy down your rate over time. The way this works, our economy grows. As our economy grows, slowly or quickly, depending on state policy, it still grows, and those revenues grow as well. The question is, when we have those excess growth years, do we use that excess growth to go into the coffers of the state and grow the size of our budget, or do we use it to buy down sales tax or income tax, or those are really the only state tax rates that we have? And so one method is to utilize growth to buy down your income tax rate over time. This is a method we've actually been using for about a decade. It was implemented in 2016, I think it was Senate Bill 509, and it has revenue triggers that once we reach revenue benchmarks, it reduces the income tax rate. And it's done that from 6% down to 4.7% over the last decade. And in that same amount of time, it was predicted that $1.3 billion of revenue would be lost. But now income tax revenues actually are up $4.2 billion. That tells you that we were overtaxed. Because revenues aren't actually tied to the rate at which you tax, it's tied to how productive your economy is. And so one method is growth. Another way that you can eliminate income taxes, and I've heard it from constituents of mine, they say, Bishop, why aren't you just cutting the budget? Why aren't you, the legislature, just cutting the budget? Hasn't it grown from X to Y over the last few years? Can't you just reverse that and undo that? A lot of that growth comes from a few items like federal dollars. A lot of it comes from Medicaid expansion, which was passed in 2020 and is constitutionally binding. But also, when you look at our general revenue fund, which is where all income tax revenues go, you're looking at a fund of about $14 billion. And income tax revenues account for $7.8 billion of that. Out of this fund is all of our discretionary spending. The biggest items are going to be K-12 education. The biggest items are Medicaid reimbursement rates, higher education, followed by employee benefits, and then our prison system. That's every item that's about $1 billion or more within the general revenue fund. And so when folks talk about just cutting it out, I'm here to tell you that if you eliminated all K-12 spending, all of it from the state, all higher education spending, all of it from the state, and you closed all 20 prisons across the state and fired every correctional officer, you would still be $800 million short. Just to give a little context. So I think tax spenders should always be held account by taxpayers, and they should be prudently spending taxpayer dollars, always. And I think there are efficiencies to be found in our budget, without a doubt. But eliminating the income tax using cuts alone is not something that's possible. And if we used growth alone, it would probably take somewhere in the ballpark of 25 to 30 years, depending on your economic assumptions, your forecasting. And so the third way that you can eliminate income taxes is utilizing replacement revenue. And when you talk about replacing revenue from one revenue stream with another, you get to have a very interesting philosophical discussion about which taxes are more tolerable and less tolerable than other taxes. Because I'm willing to guess that we think some taxes are worse than others. I'm willing to guess that some taxes we go, I can tolerate that, and other taxes we find downright atrocious. I'm here to say that income taxes, especially at a state level, all the taxes levied by the state, are the worst taxes of all. And they're bad for a lot of reasons. And I want to go through why exactly it's so bad. Income taxes are bad because they're destructive to our economy. We talk about that economic forecasting. We talk about that economic opportunity. We talk about the lack of growth. We talk about this sort of micro-depression, the death by 1,000 paper cuts that keeps escalating and keeps getting worse year after year. You're talking about an economy that has slowed. And I think the biggest thing that the state has done to affect that slowness is levying income tax. And the reason why is pretty intuitive. You get less of what you tax, right? So if you tax cigarettes, you actually get less smoking. You tax alcohol, you get less drinking. One state had a death tax, and they researched it and found that less people died. Now, they went to other states to die, but you had less death because what you tax, you get less of. But when you're taxing income, you're taxing productivity, you're taxing creativity, you're taxing innovation, you're taxing someone using their time to make something, to produce a good, produce a service. And that's the very engine of economic growth and wealth creation, is people doing those things. And so when you tax that thing and you get less of that thing, it makes sense that you get less economic growth. Because the economy grows not because people buy more things. It grows because people make more things or make something out of themselves, right? It grows because they add products and services to the economy. But I don't think income taxes are just bad economically. I also find them to be very untransparent. And the reason why is pretty simple, right? Not only do I mean untransparent in that they tax the people of Missouri through withholdings, and so a lot of average Missourians don't know how much it is they actually pay in income taxes, right? A lot of folks get refunds. A lot of folks are happy to get refunds. And actually, they're just paying the government an interest-free loan, and the government's stealing that interest that they could have had somewhere else if they'd had that money in their pocket. But that's not even what I mean. I mean it's untransparent in that every single good and service that you consume today, its cost is increased by income taxes. Because that costs whomever is producing that good or service, it costs them, and that cost gets passed on right down to the consumer. And it happens over and over again. You know, you can take this for instance. I always use something new at for every example, but you take simply lemonade, right? So you've got the folks who grow the lemons, assuming this is actual lemonade, I don't know. But you got the folks who grow the lemons, right? You got the folks who harvest them. You've got people who are making plastic bottles someplace else. All of that manufacturing process comes together. It's distributed. People are involved in that. It finally goes to a retail store. People are involved in stocking those shelves. By the time it gets to us, by the time we've purchased it, every step of the way, parts of their costs are income taxes on payroll and everything else. And that just gets passed on to you and me. And so every good and service, it's taxed right now. We just don't see it. It's hidden from us.
You left out the fuel tax and the sales tax.
Yeah, I mean, no, that's a great point, right? Taxes influence the cost of things. That's really my point. And so income taxes, I think, are particularly not transparent because they're hidden from us, particularly. Consumption taxes, on the other hand, sales taxes. By the way, remember I frame this as which taxes are less tolerable and more tolerable than other taxes, right? There's good reason not to like any taxes, but sales taxes at least exist at the final point of consumption. It's right there in front of you at the bottom of your receipt, the bottom of your invoice for you to see. It's a transparent process so that you and I know exactly how much the government costs. And I don't think it's a coincidence that as income taxes have been introduced, that's when government has grown the most. Because that's when people didn't actually know how much their government actually cost them. But it's not just untransparent, it's also not a very fair tax. Currently, 2.8 million Missourians pay into that $7.8 billion, that pot of money. There are 43 plus million people who come in and out of Missouri, traveling to Missouri. If you were to rely more on consumption taxes than income taxes, you would be ensuring that those people also contribute to that pot of money. That instead of 2.8 million Missourians who are spending their time and talent making something with their time and talent, making an income with it, you would also capture revenue from those who are passing through Missouri. And it would equalize out the cost of that $7.8 billion among 46 million people instead of just 3 million people. It's also a less voluntary tax. You can't choose whether or not you make a living, but you can choose what it is you actually consume. You have more choice over how much you're taxed because you have more control over your consumption. And so these are reasons why I would say consumption taxes, and I could come up with more, I'll be honest, but these are reasons why I would say consumption taxes are more tolerable than income taxes. If you get through that conversation and you start to have this conversation about replacement revenue and you've looked at the different types of revenue generation and you've said, okay, this is the one we really absolutely have to get rid of and this is one that is more tolerable and maybe we can rely on that, you start to get to putting those words down on paper. And what this bill says is it has two distinct sections, okay? One section is a constitutional guarantee, which means once this is passed, if it is passed, if we vote yes on Amendment 5 on August 4th, we have a constitutional guarantee that the growth alone model will be implemented. That we will use excess growth over time to buy down our rates over time. And it'll take probably around 30 years. That's a safety net, right? Because that growth alone model, that's how it works. And if you think that's too long, so do I. That's why we wrote the second section. The second section says, that's too long. We want to eliminate income taxes faster, and so we're going to use the replacement model as well. But it's a constitutional may. It's not a shall, it's a may. It's a constitutional possibility. And what it does is it allows the legislature to have a very narrow conversation, a guardrailed conversation around consumption taxes. And the guardrails are really important. The guardrails are the things often most overlooked. The guardrails are these. It's 4 things. And if you're following along or you're interested in following along or someone back home is wanting to look it up, it is Section 26, subsection 2, subdivision 2. That's what we're talking about. The whole piece of legislation, by the way, is 697 new words. So I always encourage folks to read it themselves. It's pretty short. But what it says, it has 4 important guardrails. 1, it has to be for the purpose of eliminating income taxes and reducing local tax rates. Okay? Guardrail 2, it has to be revenue neutral or less. It can't generate new dollars for the government. The government cannot grow from this plan. And that revenue neutrality is important. What it means is that $7.8 billion that's generated by the income tax revenue, that's the only amount that can be generated by any new consumption taxes. And so those consumption taxes have to be for the purpose of eliminating income tax and reducing local tax rates. They have to be revenue neutral or less. They have to be in the same piece of legislation, and they have to be enacted within 5 years of the constitutional amendment's passage. Now, those 4 guardrails act as a constitutional framework, which is what we like out of our constitutional amendments. It's what we like to be in our Constitution. You know, 40 pages of the 200 pages of our Constitution is marijuana alone. It's literally just a bill that they passed right into the Constitution. And it's caused all kinds of trouble, and there's mistakes there, and now they can't fix it because it's bound up in the Constitution and it's too challenging to fix because they put all those little details into the constitutional amendment itself. A Constitution is designed to be short and sweet and more of a framework than a law book. But the framework here creates a predictable path for any law going forward. You can take those guardrails and reverse engineer them. Put them all in a big math equation, and you come out with 4 big variables in your math equation. And those are these. You've got timeline. What is the year that the income tax rate reaches 0%? You've got base. What are the number of things which are liable to have a sales tax upon them? Right now, we have over 200 plus exemptions. About 30%, 35% of consumption is taxable. So not very much of the economy today.
What does your bill, what's the amount after this?
We're getting there.
Okay.
So base is your second variable. Your third variable is rate, which is what is the rate at which you tax that base at. And then the fourth variable is your revenue picture. What does it look like for the state of Missouri? Is it revenue neutral? Is it revenue less? Does the state lose $1? It can't gain $1 because that's prohibited by the constitutional amendment itself. And those 4 variables are all interrelated. So you pull one lever and it affects the others, right? So you really can't separate them. They all kind of have a cause and effect upon them. But what I'll tell you, just to give you a general sense, a general idea, I'm going to give you some ranges, but I'm going to give you a specific example here really quick. If you told me I want to eliminate income taxes in 2032, 0% by that date, and I want to do it revenue neutrally, which means the government doesn't grow, but the government doesn't lose any money either. And you had as wide of a base as possible, which means you had a sales tax rate on as many goods and services as possible, except for a few things that are federally exempted, that aren't considered consumption, right? Things like real estate, things like half of healthcare is federally exempted, food costs, airfare is federally exempted, nonprofit, gasoline, some base exemptions, right? But as broad of a base otherwise. The rate you're looking at then is, well, let me start with the rate you pay right now is 4.225%. The total state rate you're looking at then is 4.97%.
On top of?
No. You go from 4.225 to 4.97%. Now, I'm not pretending that that's going to be exactly where it lands, because you tell me, well, I'd like to exempt XYZ. And by the way, the governor has said, I'm not signing anything that doesn't exempt all of health care. And what I just gave you was 42% of health care, because that's the federal exemption. And so we know we're going to have other exemptions. And what that does is it creates either a higher rate, a longer timeline, or a revenue hit, right? Because all those variables are connected. But even still, we can give a very confident range for all those variables. We're going to eliminate income taxes between 2032 and 2036. We're going to do it on a base that includes a range of exemptions on necessities. We're going to do it on a rate between 5 and 6%. We're going to do it with a revenue picture of 0 to minus $500 million. And so, because the bill has a constitutional framework, you can reverse engineer and you can be pretty certain where you're going to land on the statutory language itself. Because we wanted to create a constitutional framework that made sure it was directive enough to the legislature on how to go about this process without being so involved that we run into some sort of problem down the line because we codified some word or something within the Constitution that we then have to go back and fix. And if you were to do this, if you were to do all of this, there's more effects than just eliminating the income tax. Remember that first guardrail has to be for the purposes of eliminating income tax and reducing local tax rates. If you expand the sales tax base on a state level, you can use those revenues to eliminate income taxes, but you're also expanding the base on a local level. And so what naturally happens is the local political subdivisions get more revenue. Those subdivisions which are charging and levying a sales tax right now might be 1%, right? And they would get more revenue as you had more things which are taxable. What this constitutional amendment says, that if we expand the base, then the locals necessarily get more revenue. They have to use that revenue to roll back their local rates while being revenue neutral. And so if $1 million is generated off of 1% and $2 million is what comes in, then that 1% would have to be rolled back to 5%. And there's 3 ways that they can roll back the rates. They can roll back the sales tax rate itself, which is the most commonly used rate. They can roll back real property or personal property tax rates, and then they can roll back, not relevant here, earnings tax rate. That's Kansas City and St. Louis. And so this has an effect locally as well. And currently, you might have heard 4.225 and thought, well, I pay more in sales tax than that. That's the state portion, and then you have local sales taxes that are sort of layered and added on top of that, right? And so the average rate, I think, is something like 8.44% across the state. Now, I don't know if anyone actually pays that, right? It's just the average. You go to the cities and they pay more. You go to other places, they pay more. If you go in a CID or whatever it is, right? That's how it works. But if that local expanded base revenue were utilized to roll back sales tax rates, for instance, there's a world in which a particular political subdivision actually walks away with no income tax and a lower overall sales tax rate, even while the state sales tax rate would be more. And the reason why goes back to fairness. It's because you apply that sales tax code across the board, instead of applying it only to 35% of items. Anyways, I'm not here to talk at you guys as much as I'd like to answer questions, but I did want to give a framework for what the constitutional amendment says, a little bit of the history and the why, and maybe I answered some questions, maybe I actually caused more questions. We're going to take some time to get through all of that. The microphone is corded, so if you have a question up here, I'll lend you a mic, but if you're back there, you'll have to just yell. And the goal here is to answer all your questions sufficiently to the point that we all leave here voting yes on Amendment 5. So there's my bias out there in front. You maybe put that together when I said that I sponsored the bill, though. So, anyways, did you have a question, sir?
Yeah, I don't need the mic.
Okay.
Have you considered the added cost to different things that might be taxed to where they would have to do the tax collection cost? Like, say, our insurance company, they're not set up for collecting taxes right now, so they'd have to hire personnel, and then in turn our insurance would go up even higher, and then you put the tax on top of it.
Yeah. Did everyone sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead if.
That's just one, you can answer that one.
So the question was, have we considered what the added cost of a service provider, for instance, that doesn't currently collect the sales tax would have to add in order to collect that sales tax? I've talked with a lot of firms about this, actually. The consensus is they save money because they don't have to do payroll taxes in the same way, right? So the administrative costs of not administering the income tax is offset considerably by the cost of administering a sales tax. And I'll actually go one further. The Department of Revenue thinks that about $1 billion is spent just on the administration of the income tax. That's $1 billion of savings that plows right into a lower rate overall for the state of Missouri because it's a more efficient way of actually administering and collecting taxation. And so I have considered it. I can't say I've done specific number crunching on specific providers. I've talked with them. But what I can tell you is we've done specific number crunching when it comes to the Department of Revenue to get a sense of what that effect would be. And it makes sense, right? Because you would have fewer vendors, fewer collection points for the Department of Revenue than you would have income taxpayers. And the amount of information you have to collect on income taxpayers is extensively more than what you have to collect from a sales tax collection at a point of transaction. That's a really smart question. Did you have another question?
Are you considering taxing things like insurance?
Like
Auto
insurance?
Insurance, a life insurance, all the different insurances, is that on the table?
So when I gave you that broad base rate, that 4.97 number, that was accounting for pretty much everything except for the things that I said it wasn't counting, right? And so it was a broad-based sales tax rate. As far as what those exemptions are in the future, the governor has said he doesn't want to tax a few items. That's been very important, very public, very forward about that. There's some constitutional prohibitions as well. There's some federal prohibitions as well. It is probably better to think about what wouldn't be as opposed to the items that are, because the goal would be to broaden it and then back up with exemptions more than it would be choosing and piecemealing this item or that item or the other. And so,
As a retired person
yeah.
who doesn't really pay any income tax right now, my largest money spent, and it's like $10,000 a year, is insurance. And that's not counting medical insurance either. It's probably closer to $20,000 a year I'm spending. And if that's taxed at your, let's say, 5%,
Yeah.
we're talking about an extra $1,000 that I will have to pay to survive when, with sales, with income tax, I don't have to pay.
Yeah, so there's a question about
That's mostly
seniors
retired.
broadly there, I guess is what I would say. Does that seem fair? Yeah, so seniors are the ones I think who probably know the benefits of no income tax better than any of us because we've spent the last 4 years eliminating all of their income taxes. We eliminated income taxes on Social Security. We eliminated income taxes on public pensions. We eliminated income taxes on capital gains, which is obviously more retirees. We also did a property tax freeze, where the assessed rate, right?
We've used all of them.
Yeah, and so they're the ones who know about these benefits, and they're the ones who know that these are benefits they want for their kids and grandkids as well. And so what we're doing is taking the positive things we've seen in that and applying it across the state. What we're doing is applying it across the state to their kids and grandkids who are currently leaving the state. We as a population are getting older in Missouri, and that's largely because young people are leaving the state, because economic opportunities are leaving the state. And as that happens, we actually destabilize the revenue base that the state might collect, and in doing so, destabilize the ability to provide services for folks who need it, like seniors who are on fixed income, living paycheck to paycheck. And so what I would say is a few things. I didn't even address the fact that all seniors are paying income taxes today. They're paying it in the form of embedded taxation that's passed on to them on every good and service that they are actually consuming right now. And by getting rid of that embedded taxation, we create efficiencies in the market. And by creating a more transparent, fair tax code, we now give them an opportunity to have more control over what they're spending. When it comes to the sales tax itself, there's a very real possibility the rate goes down, depending on that local calculation, right? But more than that, seniors that we're concerned about, we're not concerned about the senior who's doing quite well, right? Who's retired and doing well. We're talking about the retiree who is living more, paycheck to paycheck, as it were. Well, you tell me, when you look at those things which are taxed with a sales tax, do you think that it's those with more money or less money that consume more services? It's those with more money.
Those with more money.
Yeah, it's those with more money.
Those with less money don't have the money to do it.
Yeah.
But what concerns me is that you're talking about long-term, and you're talking about, like, the goal is to provide things that are going to stay, and it's going to go down, and this and that. Nothing ever goes down. Nothing ever goes down.
That's not true. Things go down. Prices.
What gets put in and put out?
Prices go down. Prices do go down, and gas is actually a great example of this. If gas goes down to $70 a barrel, guess what? Next morning, the price of that fuel goes down here. So prices do go down because of natural competition. You encourage productivity in the state of Missouri, and you're going to see more competition existing that's driving that price down. But I do want to finish the point that I was making, which is that wealthier individuals are the ones who are consuming more services. When we have a sales tax code that is acutely focused on goods, as it is today, it's hitting those things which the retiree is relying on as they go paycheck from paycheck. By broadening the sales tax base, by making it more fair, where it applies to goods and services across the economy, not just a narrow part of the economy, you actually create a more efficient and the lowest possible sales tax rate that you could have. I'm going to go with you next, sir. Woman in the purple in the back. Sorry. No. Yeah. You had your hand up.
This is the danger of an aging population. My attention span fades in and out. So,
What did you say? Sorry.
I said, the danger of an aging population is my attention span fades in and out.
Oh.
And I wasn't sure I understood the answer to the question about whether our insurances exempt.
Yeah, there's no exemption in the constitutional amendment, and the
Insurances are sales taxable. Would be.
What- yeah, they would be taxable, just as a number of things are taxable today, right? Now, whether or not they would be taxed is an entirely different question. The reason you don't have exemptions within the constitutional amendment is because definitions in the Constitution creates a really sticky situation where the courts redefine it over time. When you define things in statute, you're able to adapt as definitions naturally grow and change. When you're writing constitutional amendments, you really want to have decades in mind, if not even longer. Like parts of our Constitution is literally, 200 years old. Parts of it were rewritten. Well, I was talking about our Missouri Constitution, but yeah, and so that's the reason why we don't spell out the exemptions there. And that's the reason that Governor Kehoe took it upon himself to say, hey, healthcare, we're not taxing. Hey, real estate, we're not taxing. Hey, agriculture, we're not taxing. Is to provide clarity where a constitutional amendment wasn't able to.
Long term, though, does he have the authority to say we're not taxing this? I mean, he's a governor for an historic moment. Right?
Yes, he does have that.
Along comes another historic moment.
Yeah, so he has that authority because it's only a 5-year window. And he has that authority because he has the power to veto. And so, yes, it was written in such a way that he might have that authority. Yeah.
But if he decides to do it, he can do it too, right?
Well, no. No one can just pass a bill on their own. There's a few people who can kill a bill on their own. The governor is not able to just say, this is what I want, therefore that's what I get. No one actually is in the entire process. That's by design, right? It takes 197 legislators plus the governor in order to do something.
But they're the ones that are gonna decide what gets taxed and what doesn't get taxed.
They're-
They're not gonna come back to us and say, okay, we can vote on that.
Well, they're the ones who decide that right now. So there's nothing that stops us constitutionally from shifting the tax burden onto sales tax right this moment and eliminating income tax. The problem is the most number of loopholes are codified in the Constitution. And so what it would do is it would have a very high rate on a very narrow base. And so it's not really a unique authority that doesn't already exist with the legislature. Which is, by the way, what you send your lawmakers to do. I get paid like $1.10 by every constituent every year, something like that. And they send me because they want me to read all the bills and study the issues and take my time to do that so that they can use their time, leading lives or playing with grandchildren or building a business or making a family or whatever it might be, right? Taking someone to soccer. So, yeah, it would be subject to the legislative process to determine that. That's correct.
It says right here that Amendment 5 allows adjustments over time. That's a clause that's really scary because it has no beginning, no ends, no nothing.
It has a beginning and a very clear beginning and end, right? And the adjustments it's talking about are the adjustments in the income tax rate, right? Because those adjustments are...
That's not clear either. It just says allows adjustments over time.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's a flyer, right? Like it tries to give you some information. There's probably more information than what you're reading right there. And what the constitutional amendment itself says is that the income tax right here, the General Assembly shall enact legislation to reduce and eliminate state individual income tax based on revenue growth until such tax is eliminated. Upon the elimination of the individual income tax, this is my favorite line actually, the General Assembly shall be prohibited from enacting or imposing any state individual income tax. And so those adjustments over time, it's actually by design.
And that has to be done in 5 years?
No, that doesn't have to be done in 5 years. That is the section, that's the section that's a constitutional guarantee that doesn't touch the sales tax whatsoever. So if this passes, what we know will happen is that excess revenues will be utilized to buy down income tax rates over time. Does that make sense? And then as far as the sales tax is concerned, that's a political fight that has to happen in the legislative process. And if nothing happens within 5 years, well, then we at least have this constitutional guarantee that, that requires excess revenues to reduce our rate over time in the same way that we have been doing over the last decade. Yes, sir.
So who, I see this isn't the same thing as Kansas passed, but there are some states that don't have the sales tax. Is there any of them that are recent that we are like, that this is a model of?
Yeah, so I think when we compare state to state, individually, Tennessee and South Dakota are probably the most comparable. But I'll be honest, you have to create a Missouri plan, right? You've got to create a unique plan for Missouri's unique situation because it's not exactly a copy-paste sort of policy. You can look at trend lines, which is what we've done a lot of, right? What are the trend lines of those states without income taxes compared to those states with income taxes? And you can look for ideas, especially amongst the dozen other states that are currently trying to move towards zero. South Carolina has been informative, for instance, but there's not like it was written completely for Missouri. It wasn't like a plan that we took from someplace else.
So for me, it's a no-brainer with the sales tax for me, but I can also understand people that are retired and on a fixed income. So how do you sell that to somebody else? Is it more, hey, your kids are going to have it better off, your grandkids are going to have it better off, or what is the selling point to the seniors?
Yeah, the selling point to the seniors is if you calculate all of the elimination that we started with them, they're obvious net winners along with everyone else. This has been a long-term plan. I've been in the legislature since 2020. I voted for each of those pieces of legislation. And it's a long-term plan of eliminating the income taxes that is being unfolded. I think the other argument is that income taxes are being levied on seniors. It's just not levied on a particular income of theirs. It's being levied on them in the form of whatever it is they're consuming. And then lastly, kind of to your point, the best thing you can do for seniors, I think, financially or emotionally or spiritually or physically, is to keep their kids and their grandkids here in the state of Missouri. And that's the thing that's not happening. In fact, Dennis normally does these town halls with me. I don't know how old Dennis is. I think he's 74. He retired a few years ago and then sort of reinvigorated MoTax Relief Now. It's a nonprofit group that worked on the senior property tax freeze in particular and lots of different sort of senior-focused tax policies. And he's been out here advocating with us, but he has a great story. It's an anecdote, right? But it is indicative of a broader picture. His son was in Chicago, was looking to start a family with his wife, and he's talking to his dad, and he said, yeah, I'm going to move down to Tennessee or Florida. And he said, well, we don't have family there. Why are you doing that? He said, they have no income taxes. He said, well, if that's all it takes, he goes, give me 2 years. We'll get rid of the income taxes here in Missouri. We'll be on a predictable path to zero. And Dennis likes to joke that we can't make him a liar, right? And so he actually got his son to move to Missouri, and his son is sort of waiting to see what exactly happens with this constitutional amendment. And so I think that's probably the biggest sell to seniors. When I talk with retirees, when I talk with seniors, they're very much aware of wanting to make life better for their kids and their grandkids, and they're very much aware of what the trend lines over the last 40 years have been. And they're very much aware of what eliminating income taxes and reforming their taxes has done for them, and they're pretty eager to see those passed on. So I'm going to go to this guy in the red hat because I accidentally skipped him. Sorry.
You were talking earlier with your example of eliminating. You understand how if you eliminate the income tax, that will help that company because they don't have to pay somebody to figure the income tax on payroll on everybody, right?
I was saying how it helps consumers. Because when a company is able to do something more efficiently, or when income tax isn't calculated in the cost of creating their product or service, those savings get passed on to the consumers through the natural economic operation of competition.
If they save money, you're going to lower the price of their product.
Yeah, because what's going to happen? It's not trickle down. It's competition is what it's called. And so what happens is maybe Simply Lemonade says, no, we're just going to keep it. Because listen, I'm not one who disregards self-interest, right? That's the engine of economy as well, is self-interest. And a lot of folks' self-interest can be good, and some folks' self-interest is just greed. But the beauty of a free market is that it can take someone who's doing something for good reasons, or it can take someone who's doing something for bad reasons, and it turns it into service for everyone. It used to be that you steal money, that's how you got rich. But now the richest among us have to provide something for us in order to get rich because they need us to consume their goods and services.
I guess my point would be is that if that was my favorite drink,
Yeah.
and product B, because of this, lowered their price a nickel a bottle, that's not going to change my mind.
Well, so that's up to you as the consumer, right? But it may change someone else's mind. My point is,
But it's my money that's in my pocket, not somebody else's that's being spent.
but it's your choice, and that's my point. It's a more voluntary tax system. That's a choice that you get to make and have control over. Now, are there people who charge more and say, well, we have a better this, or we provide this value? Sure. And then you have more value offerings, and they go, hey, we're focused on price. And then the people who are focused on price go and buy that, and the folks who maybe have brand loyalty or whatever it is, as you mentioned, they go to this. And so the way that economic sort of forces work is competition drives prices down naturally. And we've seen that over time. I mean, we can see that really in our day-to-day lives. There's a reason that people would rather be on low income today than they would be a king 300 years from now. That's wealth creation. It's because wealth gets created through competition and cooperation. That's how it works. There's a reason that 85% of homes today have air conditioning and only 15% of homes had it 70 years ago. It's because as they got better at creating them, other people entered into that market. It became cheaper and more accessible for a greater number of people. And so, yeah, naturally that competition drives down those prices. Yeah, I'm trying to hit folks who haven't asked a question yet. We'll circle back, don't worry.
My question, okay, the Hancock Amendment.
Yes.
When you put this new thing into the way it's going to be, the government, the legislators will decide on the tax rates. That would violate the Hancock Amendment, right? Because they
No.
can't do
No.
it
So the
without voter approval.
So the Hancock Amendment doesn't actually protect us from rates being risen. That's not what it does. I actually.
Requires voter approval.
No, it doesn't. No. So no, we've got it right here. It's section 18E, right? So what it does is it requires voter approval if a proposal generates revenue. It's not if the rate goes up, it's if a proposal generates revenue. And so if a proposal is revenue neutral or less, the Hancock Amendment isn't initiated at all. It's only for revenue generation. In fact, it defines it very specifically. It's revenue generation of either $50 million adjusted annually by the percentage change in the personal income of Missouri for the second previous fiscal year, or 1% of total state revenues for the second fiscal year prior to the General Assembly's action, whichever is less. And so it's not actually on rates, it's on revenues. Well, this constitutional amendment doesn't allow the legislature to generate revenue, not at all. And so if this amendment isn't allowed to generate revenue and the Hancock Amendment addresses revenue generating proposals, then this completely comports with the Hancock Amendment, and it stays the exact same, that if the legislature were to propose a revenue generating proposal, then it would have to go to a vote of the people, just like it always has. Now, I want to address some things, though, because this has been one of the most often told myths on social media. What it's addressing and what people have read, and I'll say, look, there's been 4 versions of this bill, from introduction to it's called Truly Agreed, when we finally passed it. And the first version was not as good of a version, I'll be honest. I kept it in the House committee for 2 months fighting tooth and nail, partly because of what it said about the Hancock Amendment. And I insisted. I said, no, you got to take that out, because it had Section 18 and Section 18E as just writ large exemptions. That's what it had. And I said, you got to take that out. They took out Section 18, and someone said, well, Bishop, would you reread Section 18E? And I said, sure. So I went and I read it, which is what we're reading here today. And it has that part that if you generate revenue, you do the math, it's $93 million. And as I looked at that and I thought, well, shoot, if we're trying to replace a $7.8 billion fund, right? $93 million becomes a rounding error. And the idea of hitting $94 million, that is definitely a possibility for whatever reason, right? Growth or the other. And if that happened, according to 18E, the whole thing gets tossed out just like that. The whole thing gets undone. And so I conceded. I said, yeah, you know what? Okay, we've got to address 18E within the constitutional amendment. And so the way that we addressed 18E within the constitutional amendment is this, that it shall not be considered new annual revenue for the purposes of Section 18E of this article. But that created a new problem. That created a new problem because then it was like, well, wait a second, so can now the legislature just generate any revenue? And so that's when I went back and put the revenue neutral piece in, that it had to be revenue neutral in the same piece of legislation, so that we restored what the intent of the Hancock Amendment was. And so that's a lot of talking, right? Like that's a lot of explaining, and it's you got to kind of piece it all together. I think some folks read maybe the first version and ran with it instead of reading the last version and what it does. But Hancock Amendment says that if a revenue-generating proposal is passed by the legislature, it has to go to the vote of the people. That is still intact because this constitutional amendment is not allowed to generate revenue. And if we were to hit $94 million, instead of the whole thing going off to the wayside, we just have to send it back to the people in the form of a refund on their income tax. on a further elimination of their income tax. So that's the Hancock situation. That's the whole conversation.
So didn't the state of Missouri pass a $15 wage thing? Didn't the state of Missouri put something about, years ago, concealed carry? Didn't they do something about Medicaid? And then the legislature overruled all of it after we voted it. I'm afraid to give you guys the power
Yes.
because I think you're just going to abuse it.
Yeah, that's a fair question.
Now,
Oh, go ahead.
I'm not saying anything negative about the people. I'm just saying the track record speaks for itself.
So none of the items that you mentioned were overridden at all, just for the record, just real quick.
And it doesn't matter what you tell me, because everybody in this room was shaking their head, yeah.
But it didn't happen. I mean, it is important to know. Medicaid expansion occurred. Medicaid expansion occurred, and guess what? I wish it didn't occur. What was the concealed carry one?
A long time ago, it was something about guns that got overruled.
No, no. I think you may be talking about constitutional carry. I don't. That's still intact. And then the minimum wage, that actually remained intact too. That was a Proposition A, and it had two components, right? Minimum wage of $15, and the second part was that it was paid sick leave.
Yeah.
That's the part that changed in some bill last year. I don't remember what the bill number is. And that was from Proposition A. But do you know what the difference between Proposition A and Amendment 2 were? It's really significant. Amendment 2, the Medicaid expansion one, was a constitutional amendment. Proposition A was a statutory bill. And so the process itself actually allows for a legislative conversation to be had around statutory propositions by initiative petition. Why does it do that? It does that for our own well-being. It does that so that we can go, oh shoot, wait a second, that statute was passed and we didn't fully calculate all of the negative, devastating effects on small businesses, because it was the small businesses who came to us and said, hey, we literally can't afford this. The big businesses were like, oh yeah, we got you, we'll do that. But we were about to change every small business and chase them all out of the state of Missouri, and probably worse, probably just drive them into the ground so that they went out of business. And well, no, it's very important. And so what our process allows, right, is for adjustments to statutory bills. So Proposition A was a statutory bill. We made an adjustment after feedback from the people, and the fact is, the same people of Missouri who voted for Proposition A voted for a super majority of individuals to go to the legislature who were all saying that Proposition A was bad. So you tell me what is actually reflective of the will of the people. What I've learned is that the process is actually pretty nuanced, especially when it comes to bills. It really matters which words get in there. And it's good for us to be able to adapt. And that's what happened with Proposition A. And so you talk about the legislature just overturning things. It is important to correct, because Medicaid expansion was not overturned, right? Because constitutional carry was not overturned, because only part of Proposition A was changed by its own allowances, and that was, I think, with reasons that you would probably agree with. You probably go, yeah, we should be voting for that. And so
All I'm saying is,
all you're saying is, why would we trust the legislature, right?
you have an image problem.
There.
That's all I'm saying.
No, that's fair. And part of me addressing that image problem is addressing some of the facts that we're bringing forth right here. But let's talk about the core issue, which is, hey, folks don't trust the legislature. And I'll be honest, I've been around the legislature. I don't altogether trust them, right? I get it. But this amendment doesn't rely on trust. That's the good part. I think the first version of it did. I really do. And that's why I held it up for 2 months. Now, everyone who's entrusted with responsibility wants to earn the trust of those who've given them that responsibility, right? So I can't say that I don't want your trust, but I can't say, trust me, without bringing verifiable facts, without bringing rationale and reason and giving you the why and sitting here with you to explain exactly what went into this. But this is written in a way that it would be nice to trust the legislature with it, right? That's good, but it doesn't require trust in the legislature, not at all. And the reason why it doesn't require it is because of those very specific guardrails that we put in place. Yeah, it's a great point, though. I mean, it's a really important. And your last comment about you've got an image problem, yeah, you're absolutely right. I would not be on the road. This is my 6th town hall this week, right? Like if we didn't have an image problem, everyone would be like, oh, hey, hooray, Amendment 5, we're voting for it. If everyone was voting for Amendment 5, I'm just being honest, I would probably be on vacation or something, right? So I'm pretty tired. but instead, I'm out here trying to address what you aptly called an image problem.
Appreciate you being here.
Yeah, so it's a good point, though.
I don't need that. I'm going to give you.
She's going to hold that mic for you.
I'm going to give you an example that you might want to think about. Have you ever heard of the state of New Hampshire?
Yeah,
Okay, no sales tax.
yeah.
Okay, nice state.
No income tax, no
Beautiful
sales
state.
tax, yeah.
I mean, no income tax. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I said that wrong. And the legislature was controlled by the Republicans for many, many years, and it ran very smoothly. And then the massholes moved up from Massachusetts, and they
Okay.
invaded the state, and they wanted all their services, and they wanted this, and they wanted that, and they wanted everything.
Yeah,
And the legislature dumped everything onto property taxes.
yeah,
We have a friend up there with a nice average little home.
yeah.
Retired. And what did he say, it was over 14,000? It's over $14,000 a year just in his property taxes. He's eating.
terrible.
He's eating crackers
Yeah,
because
sad.
he's got to pay that.
yeah,
That's when the legislature went out of control.
yeah,
It is now a Democratic legislature.
yeah,
And so my concern is Chicago moves in, Kansas City expands, St. Louis pushes out into the other counties.
Yeah.
And we start swinging the legislators to the D side. And I didn't put the whole word in there.
Oh, thank you.
We start swinging them to the D side, and they're going to get to choose where they're going to put all the sales tax. So maybe they don't put it on my state tax, but if we get up to a 20 or 30 or 40% sales tax, it'll completely shut down the state.
So, yeah, there's a few things to talk about there. You said a lot. One, just real quick on property taxes, personal property and real property. Section 8 of Article 10 prohibits the state from levying that. So you have that constitutional protection that's already in place.
Run that by me again, please.
Section 8 of Article 10 says that the state cannot levy a personal property or real property tax. And so that's already a protection.
Only the county can do that.
That's exactly right. So that's already a protection that we have in our Constitution. Two, there's nothing that allows in this amendment any legislature in the future to ever raise revenue, right, without having to go to a vote of the people because of what we said before, Hancock being intact. And then three,
But it's only revenue when it's higher than what you're spending. If your spending goes out of complete control,
that's a
then-
great clarification. It's not based off spending.
then it's not revenue anymore. Now they got to pay the bills.
No, revenue neutrality is actually not based on spending. It's based off of what revenue was generated by the income tax, right? Is generated by the income tax. But the third point I would say is all of this has to be enacted and can't be changed after this point, right? Within 5 years. And so the idea of, hey, we're going to have a seismic shift of parties, that would literally have to happen within 5 years. And then lastly, the fourth point is there are protections in here that are clear enough that I actually think this would endure a Democrat House and Senate. And the reason why is because there are guardrails that doesn't trust the legislature, that instead says this is what you must do.
At the end of 5 years, what happens then?
At the end of 5 years, all of this returns back to the normal Section 26, which is a provision passed in 2016 that says there can't be any sales taxes upon anything prior to January 1, 2015. And so it provides this exemption only for the purposes of eliminating income taxes, right, and reducing local tax rates. But then beyond that, you can't do anything to the sales tax code.
Can they reinstall?
The-
Can they reinstall income tax after 5 years?
No, they can't reinstall income tax because that's a different section. And that was my favorite part of the bill that says that it can't be reinstated, that the legislature is actually prohibited from doing so. Someone else had their hand up. Who was it? These are great questions. These are really smart questions. Yes.
I did not have my hand up, but I do have a question regarding other types of taxes. So worthy gentleman mentioned Democrats as the bane of increase, but I seem to remember the Springfield, Missouri tourism tax.
The transient guest tax?
Yeah. And so it seems like something in the late 90s, beloved to us all, Johnny Morris was able to get 20% of that tax and tourism revenue, folks toward building like the wonders of wildlife and conservation, and good. I'm glad for all of that, and was able to continue to draw that until something like 2011 or some. So, how is this piece of legislation impacted either negatively or in tandem by other types of revenue generating taxes that might be passed like that?
Yeah, this has no effect on that one way or the other, right? And so a lot of folks talk about different problems or things that they really like, and this doesn't fix problems or exacerbate a lot of them. What this focuses on specifically is that we've got a very archaic, out-of-date tax code that's destroying our economy and depressing wages. And so, but yeah, this doesn't affect that. This doesn't affect. This doesn't affect that one way or the other. Go ahead.
No, get somebody else.
Would you like to go ahead? Would you like a?
I would, at the risk of saying some things that I probably shouldn't. So I'll try and stay on subject matter. So in here, I'm a county commissioner. In here, I find 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines where we talk about reduction of local tax rates. I've heard you say a lot philosophically, but I'm failing to see the nuts and bolts.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to work with me.
Let's do it.
Okay. So when I hear that it's if the sales tax increases, we're going to offset that at the local level.
So if the sales tax base increases, and that's an important distinction to start with.
Okay.
It's those things which are taxable. And so this legislation can't affect, or this amendment and even pending legislation can't affect local rates in that it changes those rates upward. What it can do though is change the base, which is what those sales taxes are applied to.
I get it, and you're getting the philosophical weeds again.
Okay.
So if at the local level, I decide to put something before the voters, and I'm allowing them to vote on it, right? Because that's what's required of us. Then they pass that. So let's say I can get a use tax on the ballot. Will we see that as an increase in our revenue?
Yeah.
Or will we need to offset sales tax, personal property, class 2 or class 1? Those are the options I have. Answer that question for me. I pass a use tax, it brings in $1 million.
Yeah, that's a good question. If you pass a use tax, if a community passes a use tax, right, that's independent from what has to be utilized to roll back those rates. What rolls back the rates is only the expanded sales tax revenue, not any other decision that a local subdivision makes for itself. And the reason that's possible, by the way, because you asked for nuts and bolts, is because all sales taxes are collected at a point of transaction, right, from Walmart or whomever, and then it goes to the Department of Revenue. And it doesn't actually go to the city at all. It doesn't go to the municipality, none of that. What it does, it goes to the Department of Revenue, and then the Department of Revenue remits it back to all those taxing subdivisions that have a part of that tax that was levied at Walmart. So what we will do then, nuts and bolts, real nitty-gritty stuff, is have an old sales tax base, right, which is what exists right now, the new sales tax base bifurcated so that when it's collected, it's just separated in 2 different pots at the Department of Revenue. And then the Department of Revenue remits back the old sales tax base just like normal. And it's that new sales tax base that's used to calculate what those rollbacks are. So if you were to pass here in Lebanon, if you were to pass out here in Lebanon an increase of 0.5% or whatever it is, those new revenues stay your new revenues because that community decided that they wanted to levy a tax upon themselves and put more towards their community. This is only relating to new revenues from an expanded sales tax base, which is a state decision, not that local decision. And then it has to be revenue neutral with those new dollars. That's the point.
You just confused me, then I thought I had it.
Here, wait, I have to finish this with him, please.
I'm gonna help him.
Well, no, I need to ask, I really need to make sure that I've answered his question because it may confuse some, but maybe it made sense to him, and I need to finish this conversation.
Actually, I'm a pretty simple person, and it didn't make sense. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, the quick answer is no. That's actually the quick answer. But all the explanation I just gave was the reason why the answer is no. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm Billy Farmer. I go down to my insurance guy. He sends $1,000 off to the state. That's a new thing. That doesn't come back to the county?
No, it comes back to the county, but the amount that it comes back has to be rolled back in the rate so that the county generates the exact same revenue. It's actually 97% of the same revenue to adjust for inflation, but it's substantially equal revenue as it had
So that
before.
$1,000 doesn't make it back here unless he rolls his rate back to make that.
The locals, let's put it this way. Let's put it this way. If the locals don't raise, if they don't have a vote to raise taxes at all, right? And they don't have anything that raises revenues, if they just kind of go through this process, the locals remain completely and totally revenue neutral. As their base expands, they collect more revenue from the sales tax, but then they have to roll back the rate proportionate to how much new revenue was collected.
So he does get that $1,000 or $970, like you just said. He does get that. That goes into his coffers.
Yeah, but the rate has to be rolled
And then
back.
he'll, once he figures his income, then he'll have to roll back his sales tax.
His sales tax rate or his personal property tax rate or his real property tax rate, depending on what's levied in that tax subdivision.
We don't have a spending problem in Laclede County. Okay, we're very conscious of using the taxpayers' dollars.
Yeah.
So the issue I have that I'm still seeking clarity on is if the voters in Laclede County would pass a 0.5-cent sales tax for whatever,
Yeah.
road and bridge, law enforcement,
Yeah.
whatever. Okay, that's a new tax. You're saying I can do that with voter approval.
Yeah, that's completely independent from this constitutional amendment.
That's completely independent. So I don't have to roll back.
Nope,
I don't have to roll back.
That's right.
If they approve it, I get to keep that $1 million.
that's exactly right.
Great. That's what I need to know.
And he, in turn, should have more revenue.
Yeah, he would have $1 million more revenue because this is revenue neutral here, plus $1 million levy was passed, and so now that's $1 million more revenue.
So that $1,000 that I just spent would stay in the county back to him.
They're actually not related, right? Him expanding. Now, here, there's two ways of doing it. Did you do it before we expanded the sales tax base or after we did it, right? So at the moment of sales tax base expansion, there's a year in which local municipalities and political subdivisions, taxing subdivisions, have to equalize and be a revenue neutral position due to the expansion. Now, they can go raise more revenue on their own. After that point, any new levy that you put, so say this goes into full effect in 2032, and now it's 2039, and Laclede puts on a 0.5%. Well, that 0.5% is going to generate more revenue than it would have before, but that's completely independent from this amendment, and this doesn't stop them from raising that 0.5%. It's really just a one-time, and it actually says that, a one-time adjustment. It's a one-time equalization that occurs that keeps the local subdivisions whole, and then allows them to operate just as they have been operating with a new sales tax base.
With a greater income.
With
New sales tax base would in turn mean a greater income.
A new
coming
sales-
to the community.
No, it's the same amount because they have to take any new income from that expanded sales tax base to roll back the rate itself. So if 1% generates $1 million, and then an expanded base generates $2 million, well then you go back to 0.5% instead of 1%. So it's revenue neutral. Ish. It's 97%. I mean,
you pay down on property taxes, or you pay down on
other sales tax rates. Yeah.
other tax rates.
Other tax rates, depending on that particular taxing subdivision.
Okay, I'm having a little bit of difficulty following it. You say it's gonna be revenue neutral, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So you're not gonna allow for surplus to be established into Missouri? Because if you get more money coming in, and you say, I get this point, we're gonna send it back now by reducing stuff, how do we get a surplus in funding for future budgets and stuff like that?
So you don't actually want to generate, in my opinion, a lot of surpluses. In business you do, in a family budget you do. In government, surplus is kind of a double-edged sword.
Understand.
Yeah.
Somebody will want to spend it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that said, expenses are gonna go up and up and up each year. They're not gonna go back down. So it's either we get a surplus to help those budgets grow, or we start whacking stuff to stay at neutral.
Yeah, and so the idea here is this is revenue neutral from what the income tax was generating. Now, once it's all changed, you're right, you're going to have natural economic growth that generates naturally more revenue from your expanded sales tax base, right? Nothing stops us from generating, its revenue neutrality is tied to its income tax elimination. So the state currently just sort of naturally has some economic growth, but if the income tax is eliminated, then now you just have an expanded sales tax base of, I don't know, 5 to 6%, somewhere in there. I actually, would then immediately try to start reducing our sales tax rate if I were in the legislature, personally, because I still think that's too much revenue for the state. But I don't know if I'll convince my colleagues of that, right? But the point is, you now just have a new normal. And that new normal is a sales tax code which is more transparent and more fair. And as that sales tax code generates more revenue, just like it generates more revenue today, it allows for,
So did I hear you say that that you would go for a new sales tax or an increase, that the 4.222 or whatever could get close to 10? Is that what you said?
No, I said 5 to 6%. And then I said if I were in the legislature, I would actually introduce legislation to reduce our sales tax.
4 to 5, 1.
To 5 to 6, yeah, that's right, total rate.
I thought you meant
In addition to,
5.
no.
That would be 10, which would be huge.
That would be huge. It would be huge for a lot of reasons, right? And that's why it can't be done. It's because it's massive amounts of revenue, so you can't generate more revenue.
I agree with this gentleman said. I've got 2 nephews that have little pizza businesses, and they just took it on the chin. I mean, they just whelped and beat them and whatever, but they made it through the 2008 thing. When they got past it and some of the other places went belly up, did their pizzas go down in price? You all know the answer to that. No way.
Well, if everyone closed, that means there's no competition. What we're trying to do is the opposite of what happened then in 2008. If everyone closes and there's just one shop that sells pizza, then that shop gets to sell pizza for however much they want, right? What we're talking about is creating an environment in Missouri of growth, which brings more pizza shops in. And guess what? That does drive down the price of pizza. So,
Potentially, yeah.
yeah.
Big screen TVs.
Big screen TVs are a lot cheaper than they used to be.
That's
Yeah,
the
they are
one-
a lot cheaper than they used to be.
That's the one pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
And if you do like I do on Facebook Marketplace, you really get them for cheap. So, yeah. No offense to all you out there who just bought a new big screen TV, but you're really missing out. You could have got it half off, easy. I'm going to ask Melissa really quick. Would you be able to fill this up with water for me? I'm actually not a big lemonade guy myself. Yeah. It's all that. I'm kind of a lightweight. I drink water and water alone. So all that sugar, I'm feeling it.
about,
You actually swung me.
What'd you say?
You actually swung me.
Will you please say that into the microphone? He said you actually swung me, so I really appreciate that. No, I'm not trying.
I was 1,000%
Listen,
against.
I'm not trying to. It's not about winning or losing or any of that. Here's the thing. It is 697 words, but it's complicated. Legislation's complicated, and you got to talk through the details. And when we put an issue like this on a constitutional amendment on the ballot, right? Something that has probably never happened in Missouri is happening right now. We have made all of us lawmakers, right? We are all debating the nuances and the nitty-gritties. And that's not usual, and it's not a usual process. And I always say when I'm in the legislature that I'm a default no. You got to get me to yes. And I feel like I've invited a lot of folks to be a part of this legislative process, and a lot of folks are following my philosophy that I follow up in Jeff City, so I get it. What I will say, though, is there's a lot of folks out there, and we've got, what, 39 days? 39 days? If you have been convinced, if you find this compelling, if you think that Missouri has gone long enough with slow decay and you want to create future opportunities, I'm asking you more than just voting yes on August 4th. I need you to find at least 5 other people, at least 10 other people to tell them that they need to vote yes. And it's complicated. I'm not expecting people to be able to explain it. These folks, and I'm sorry, Lebanon Now, have recorded this whole process, this whole thing. And so I'd encourage folks to go back to it, watch it again, send it to friends, send it to family. We can make this difference. The path is clear. I told you that if we were just skyrocketed, right? If we were up at 90%, I wouldn't be here. Guess what? If we were at 40%, I wouldn't be here either, right? It's a close race. We're working it out. But
You need to clean up your advertising.
yeah, no, I think
Your advertising is not clean, and hence not being clean, people want to say no right away.
and I'm doing everything I can. I'm not an ad man, and I'm not a big campaigner. I'm a grassroots guy who talks with real people.
is this the commercial with the race cars rolling around?
One of them.
I don't think we need a comment about my traffic record, but
No, I have a problem with the ad that talks about how, well, if you pass this, your property taxes are gonna go away. I have a problem with that, because you haven't told me how my property taxes are going away. You've said a couple of things, how they may.
so the most your property taxes could be reduced is probably around 30%, the most.
But that's not what the ad says.
Yeah, no,
And I have
That's what I'm saying, clean up.
I have a real problem with that.
yeah. Yeah, no, I can respect that. I have a problem with the folks out there saying it's going to increase our rates to 20%, and the folks saying that we're defunding education, and the folks. I mean, you're right. The problem there is, frankly, that libel and slander and lies literally is protected if it's political speech. So people can say anything they want about anyone, me included, and so, yeah, no, I get that. I get that. Well, we can then make a pact, right? Because I'm here as a truth teller. I'm just getting into the words. And we can make a pact here to go out and be truth tellers as well, because the importance of this legislation could easily get lost in the campaign of it, for it and against it. But the truth is what is the real change that we need, right? The campaign, we'll move past this in 3 months. We won't ever talk or think about the campaigns again. But if we play our cards right, and if we vote yes on 5, and we pass it come the morning of August 5th, it really moves me, actually. I hope to be around 60 years from now and having kids and grandkids asking me about what Missouri was and what it has become and what I've gotten to witness over those decades. So, this is very special. There's a real opportunity here like has never been. So.
Talk to us about schools. We keep hearing, we got a lot of people in our little group
Yeah.
that are very concerned about some of these smaller schools just falling off the face of the earth.
I don't know what your name is, but you just ruined my climax. But
I'm sorry.
no, I'm teasing you.
about Amendment 5.
No, it is Amendment 5.
withdraw my
No, real quick, schools. No, it's a great question. It's a great question because it's actually in the amendment itself, and we put it in the amendment to address it and kind of belt and suspender the situation. That schools wouldn't lose any funding, and it says it right here, it's on page 3. Notwithstanding the provision in subdivision 1 of this subsection to the contrary, no political subdivision shall adjust its local tax rates in a manner that results in any reduction in funding to any public schools within or serving such political subdivision. And so this doesn't affect school funding in the slightest. That's just been a falsehood. So it's a great question. If you guys have any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. I mean, I can keep answering questions now, but I'm trying to read the room here. I'm also happy to just hang around and talk with you one-on-one. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time. Please help us in Lebanon. Please help us in Laclede.